Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. For this week's episode, we're talking about how a paid subscription newsletter is faring during a presidential election year. Ben Cohen isn't the world's biggest fan of Facebook. The founder of a political news website called The Daily Banter, Ben worked hard to build up his reach on Facebook, and for a few years he made a decent living selling advertising against his content. But after the 2016 election, Facebook pivoted away from news, and virtually overnight, the Daily Banter lost 90% of its traffic. Not only could he no longer pay his own salary, but he was also struggling to keep his stable of writers on board. Out of desperation, he moved the Banter over to Substack and doubled down on paid subscriptions. That was in early 2019. I recently checked in with Ben to see how his efforts are going and how a presidential election year affects subscription growth for a political newsletter. Before we jump into the interview, I have a question for you. Have you ever listened to an episode of this podcast and come away from it with a new insight that would help you in creating, distributing, or monetizing your own content? If the answer is yes, then that means you listen to the business of content for more than entertainment. It helps you in your career. Why am I bringing this up? Because I rely entirely on paid subscriptions to operate this podcast. They help pay for the time I spend booking the guest, brainstorming questions, interviewing the guest, and editing each episode. They pay for the hosting and production software. So if my podcast helps you in your career, can you help me in paying for it? By becoming a paid subscriber, not only will you support my journalism, but you'll also get subscriber-only newsletters that are packed with insights that will help you in your job. To subscribe, go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Thank you for supporting my work. Now on to my interview with Ben. Hey Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Simon. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so you've been on this podcast before, and we've talked a lot about your website and the business behind it. But the reason I wanted to have you on again is because we're in this kind of one to check in on how the business is going, but then also just that we're in this particular moment where we're in a U.S. Politics election year, and also the coronavirus is this major political story that I thought you might be able to give kind of a unique perspective on what it's like to run a politics-focused website during these kind of very trying times. So just to kind of give people, who haven't heard that original episode, can you give us just a little bit of a brief overview of what the Daily Banter is and its history?
So we're now called the Banter. So we were the Daily Banter. So that we closed the Daily Banter down in 2019, February 2019, after about close to 10 years of publishing. The Daily Banter was a daily news and politics website. We had, I think at our peak, we were getting anywhere from, 500,000 to 1 million unique visitors a month to the site. And the Facebook algorithm kind of dismantled our business model at the end of 2000. We spent all of 2018 trying to stay alive. Couldn't quite make it work after the algorithm change and the newsfeed change. So we essentially decided to close that down and pivot to a daily newsletter instead. So initially it wasn't actually daily. So that's why I decided to call it the Banter rather than the Daily Banter. I thought, well, if we're not going to be publishing necessarily on a daily basis, we should probably call it the Banter. So we moved to that. We moved to Substack. The platform that you publish on as well.
And so for most of its 10 years history, it was a very traffic-driven organization. It was you derived most of your revenue from advertising. At its height, when it was getting a ton of traffic from Facebook, this was when Facebook was giving publishers a lot of free traffic. You were actually, on advertising alone, you were able to support yourself and then also several contract writers who were writing under you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we were also building a subscription model as well. So the subscription became an increasingly important part of the model. I think it was around about 20 to 30% of the revenue. At the peak of advertising, we still about 20 to 30% of the revenue came in from subscription. That percentage started to change. so that subscription became more and more important to the business as the ad model
Yeah.
collapsed.
And then
And so that's why we,
like you said, something like 80 or 90% of your Facebook traffic went away. It just decimated your publication in terms of its advertising revenue. And you were just like, in order for us to in order for us to survive, we need to rely 100%. We need to go all in on subscriptions. And that's when you moved it from its own separate website to Substack. And I think so Substack uses Stripe, and it just so happened, right, that you were also using Stripe for your membership prior to switching to Substack. So did that make it a little bit easier for you to switch completely onto Substack without losing any of your subscribers?
Well, we weren't actually on Stripe. We were on so we used a payment platform called TinyPass, which is now called Piano, and that's a mixture of PayPal and just using. I think they use there's a PayPal's Overlord. I forget the company name. They have a whole payment system as well. So it was a mixture of you could sign up through PayPal or you could sign up with your own credit card using their platform, but you could transfer some of that financial data, but the PayPal accounts you couldn't. So we couldn't transfer all of our subscribers basically. So that's actually been a really difficult part of it, was transporting people's financial data from one platform to the other. That made it actually really difficult. So the move over to Substack was painful, really, really painful.
And what did you do? Did you have to convince them to cancel their subscription and then resubscribe, or did you just import their email addresses? Like, how did you handle that?
So some people are still actually subscribed via our old platform just because, for whatever reason, didn't want to move off. And then a lot we were able to move over. We were able to move a lot over to Stripe, and then we've had new people signing up as well. So the vast majority of our subscribers are safe and sound on the new platform. But we still have a small money.
And so your output actually changed a little bit, because before, when you were advertising focused, you were putting out like 4 or 5 articles a day, because that's how, what you need a little, like, obviously you wanted to have high quality, but you also need a little bit of volume in order to generate the kind of traffic that can be sorted through, that could generate a lot of advertising revenue. So what is your weekly output now? Like, now you're just focusing 100% on quality, right? So what are you producing on a weekly basis?
So we produce now anywhere from 4 to 6 pieces a week, and those are significantly longer and more in depth, and none of them are at all tailored to game social media algorithms. We don't fiddle the headline. We don't, we haven't tried to sort of frame the article so that it plays well on social, which you sort of have to do when you're dependent on ad money. So we would do about, on the Daily Banter, I would say, some of the pieces that we would do, the less thoughtful pieces that we would do, the more quickfire pieces, a lot of those were kind of tweaked to make sure that they played well on social. But we don't do any of that now at all. It's just purely focused on quality.
But you did build up a pretty big social media following. Like, I know you had at least 15,000 subscribers on Facebook alone. Are you still able to use those platforms to drive decent traffic to the newsletter articles, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 40,000 Facebook followers. I can't remember how many we had when we last spoke, but it's around about 40,000. We've got a few thousand people on Twitter that we have, and some of our contributors, like Bob Cesca, for example, has a significant Twitter following. So we've got access to, we do have a reasonably sizable social media presence that we can, that we use to distribute our articles. Plus, we built up a mailing list, during the years of the Daily Banter. I focus on that more and more. The more I realized that subscription was going to be a key part of the business, I really started to focus on driving email collection. So that thankfully that paid off. That's helped us tremendously. when we pivoted to
How much
Substack.
have you noticed the change in social media traffic? Like, obviously, your Facebook page was getting less and less reach, and that was part of the motivation for you switching over. But does social media, do articles you write still get shared widely on social media? Do you still have the occasional kind of viral article in the way that it was kind of like in the old days where something would just shoot off like a rocket ship and be shared by thousands of people? Like, what are you noticing from a social media perspective?
Yeah, we do. We just had one recently that just went viral on social media, and it went for almost 4 or 5 days of getting kind of significant amount of traffic, and it translated into lots and lots of subscriptions, emails and subscriptions as well. So, which is not necessarily always the case. Sometimes you'll get a flood of traffic and you'll get no subscribers, but this one gave us a flood of traffic and actually some subscribers. So it does happen. It's much, much, much rarer, I would say.
But you're okay with that because you're
It's
trying to just kind of slowly build a more committed readership.
Yeah, I couldn't care less what the traffic is. It's kind of not, when you see something's taken off, you think, okay, that's nice. But I barely look at the traffic anymore. I look at like how many people are opening the emails. I look at how many people are subscribed to us via email, how many people are paying subscribers. That's what interests me now. I'm not interested in how the articles play on social media.
And you have a couple different writers who are still writing for you, right?
Yeah, I do. Bob Sesko and Justin Rosario are regular contributors, and I've got a couple of other people who contribute in a little bit less frequently.
And Bob Seska is one of those people who has like a kind of like a quote unquote brand. Like, he is very conscious about maintaining his social media presence. You can tell he has kind of like a fan base. He has his own popular podcast, right? So he's like a name. He's kind of like your most recognizable name writing for you.
Yeah, but Bob Sesko is his own his one man band. I mean, he's pretty. I think his podcast is one of the top rated political shows in the country, the Bob Seska Show, and so he's got a big Twitter following and a significant following on Facebook too. So yeah, he's definitely sort of the most well known writer of all of us.
And I mean, obviously you can't speak for him, but like, what is he like what is he like working with the banter versus freelancing? I know he writes for Salon and other things. Like, what's his kind of why does he like writing for the banter, do you think?
I think it's because he helped build the banter. We that was the deal earlier on. I brought Bob and Ches Pazienza, who sadly a couple of years ago passed away. But Bob, Ches, and I kind of built the banter in the beginning, and it was sort of based on complete kind of editorial freedom. I told Bob that he had complete editorial freedom. I wouldn't tell him what he could and couldn't write, and I think he's always sort of enjoyed that, and he's just been like really loyal to the site. And obviously I can't pay what Salon pays. I would imagine, but I think Bob just enjoys the community and likes being able to say what he wants to say.
And what's kind of that you said you publish like 4 to 6 pieces a week? What's kind of the breakdown in free versus stuff that's behind the paywall, and how do you decide which side of the paywall an article goes on?
So we usually publish maybe 1 or 2 pieces for free, and the rest are behind the paywall. I would say it's usually 2 pieces that go out for free each week, and 3 to 4 that are paid. And what goes into that? Actually, I just chop and change my mind about that all the time. There's no specific. If I feel that there's an important piece that needs that needs sharing, and I'll put it out for free, and that's often based on the fact that I think it could, the articles that are really, really worth spreading, and sometimes that works in our self-interest, that we pick up a lot of emails, but I don't try to sort of think about it in that way so much. Obviously, I'm trying to get emails. We're trying to get people to sign up, but I would rather, I spent so many years just worrying about what was going to take off on social media and what was going to drive traffic, but I just now being able to write properly, being able to write what I want to write, and publishing other people who are saying what they want to say, and not worrying too much about how it's going to play, what the statistics are. I'm more interested in just sort of, doing the best we can and getting important messages out if we feel that they're important. So I don't really have any specific criteria for what's a paid piece and what is a free piece.
And
Having said that, sometimes I think, this is a bit more personal, so I'll put it behind the paywall, because I feel like the more personal pieces are, I feel our paying members should have access to those.
And Substack allows you to differentiate, like when you're publishing the article, you can say it has a commenting feature that's pretty good, I feel like, and you say you could say. This comments, or even if the piece is made for free, you can make it so only paying subscribers can comment, or you can put it that anybody can comment. How do you guys have like a vibrant comment section? Do you make the ability to comment a subscriber only perk, or how do you handle that?
Right now, it's anyone can publish, anyone can comment on the free pieces. I haven't thought about that. I've toyed with that idea. I haven't done that yet, by just making it members only can participate in the commenting section. There's something that I may well do.
Obviously they can, the paying members can only comment on the articles that are behind the paywall, right? Because by definition, so they do have at least a little bit of ability to have an exclusive feature for commenters. But for the free articles, you make it so that anybody can comment.
Anyone can comment, yeah. I thought about changing that, but it's not something that it's not a kind of high priority right now, but it may be something that will change.
I've noticed you started doing a podcast. What's the thinking behind that? Like, why did you decide to launch a podcast?
Actually, it's because my old kind of news editor, Mike Luciano, contacted me and asked me whether it was something I wanted to do. And I thought about it for a little bit and figured, you know what, I do. I think it'd be interesting. I think our readers would value it. And there was no, I don't really have a particular strategy per se when it comes to that right now. I'm just sort of experimenting with the platform. I'm experimenting because you can post podcasts to the newsletter. You can download them directly to the newsletter. So we're just in a kind of an experimental phase and seeing how popular it is and whether it's something that our readers want. There's no huge big strategy there, if I'm being honest.
And so are you mainly hosting it through Substack, or are people downloading it on their free podcast apps as well?
Mainly done through Substack. We're not really focusing very much on the other distribution on Spotify or iTunes yet. I think we will do, but we're in sort of in early days at the moment, and we're getting we're getting the podcast down. In terms of like the recording, the sound quality, just the format as well.
So you've been on Substack for a while now. Like, what are your thoughts about the platform? Like, is there anything that you would change?
I think it's a really, really, really smart publishing system. They've really thought about it. It's very clever. I think it's excellent. Maybe I would like to see a little bit more control over pricing, how pricing works, and how you can. It's pretty good. You do get a fair amount of control, but I feel like having maybe 3 payment options or having rather than 2 payment options and having different ways of. I'm pretty happy with it. They recently released a new feature where you can allow people to pay what they want, so that's been useful. There isn't a huge amount. I think the fees are quite high.
Yeah, they take like 10%.
Yeah, it's a bit excessive, I would say. The fees, because on top of that, you're paying fees to Stripe as well.
That adds up once you're making a ton of. The more subscribers you get, the more you're really paying Substack for not offering you much extra than you did at a lower number. So if you have 100 subscribers paying $10 a month, the Substack is getting like $1,000 a year But if you have like 1,000 subscribers paying $100 a month, Substack is getting 10,000 a year, even though they're not really doing that much differently than they were at 100. Like they're only surfacing 900 more customers, and yet they've increased their revenue by a factor of 10.
Yeah. I think that's that to me is a bit. So there are some issues I have with the amount, and because of our subscription, that our subscription numbers are growing. I feel that every month now. It's like I see how much they're taking a significant portion of revenue. I mean, I'm quite happy for them to have a certain amount, obviously, but I think once it gets past a certain level each month, it doesn't make quite as much sense financially. I think once you're paying, if you're paying them more than $100 a month, it starts to become a little bit. It's not quite as I don't see that they're providing that much value for the service.
I wonder if one way they could address it is like once you reach, it's like almost like a marginal taxes, where for the first X number of subscribers they take 10%, and then any subscribers after that they take 5%. So then they incentivize you to reach a certain level, and then it's not like they're taking 10% of every piece of your revenue. Because what happened if you got up to 100,000? Like some publication launched on there and it got to 100,000 subscribers. The amount of money they would be pulling down from that would just be astronomical.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that obviously I want Substack to succeed. Their success is, our success is interdependent. So I definitely want them to succeed. But having said that, I don't want to be paying them hundreds of dollars a month for an email subscription for basically MailChimp kind of service. It's more sophisticated than MailChimp, but it's not that much more sophisticated than MailChimp.
Well, in some ways, it's less sophisticated because MailChimp, you can do a lot more things. You could do A/B testing headlines. You have more control of your design. You could do segmented lists. Like there's like a lot more functionality at the MailChimp account than you get from Substack.
That's true. I mean, I think I feel that the Substack system is so elegant.
It's pretty.
It makes it very easy. Yeah, it's very easy to use. I mean, it would be interesting to see whether some of the writers were up for kind of banding together and going to the management and saying, "Hey, look, this is something that you need to address." I don't know if that's something to think about in the future. I would certainly be up for being a part of a kind of a coalition of writers there. Who are able to kind of speak to the management and raise concerns about these kind of issues.
And so what have you noticed since now we're getting to the meat of why I have you on is what have you noticed since now that we're in an election year and people are starting to pay attention to politics? They're starting to get revved up. They're starting to get angrier. How does this impact a political news organization like yourself, but also specifically one that is focused solely on getting paid subscribers? Like how has this year so far affected your audience growth? And maybe we'll see if we can parse away the effects of the election year, and then we'll talk about the coronavirus and see how that's changed. So from an election year standpoint, what have you noticed?
Again, uptick in activity, uptick in readership, uptick in traffic coming to the site. We've definitely noticed that. It's quite hard to pass, the difference between what's happening. I think that because people are home, they're obviously reading more stuff, and they want, they're bored and they want more content to digest. So I feel that that's been part of it, but. The election cycle is you would expect to see more traffic in an election cycle as well, and we are seeing that. I just I don't know necessarily how much that has to do with how dependent is that on the coronavirus news. I don't know. I really don't know. It's really difficult to pass, but I can tell you that we've definitely seen an uptick in traffic, and I've definitely seen an uptick in subscribers.
In terms of paying subscribers?
Yeah.
And do you think that this is like kind of the year to like, these are the kinds of years that are crucial for a publication like yours, especially one that's focused on recurring revenue from paying subscribers, to where if you can drive a large enough uptick in paying subscribers, then obviously they're going to auto renew, and that you'll like, this is a crucial year in terms of building not just revenue for this year, but future years. Is that kind of your thinking?
Yeah, definitely. So I do recognize that this year is going to be very, very important to the future health of the company, of the business. We can really build. Actually, the guys at Substack kind of had made an interesting point. They said, look, when you start a newsletter, you need to give it about 2 years for it to become a viable entity. And we've been going for about a year and a bit now, a year and a couple of months. And I think that they were probably pretty much spot on, that at the end of the second year, our time on Substack, we will probably have a pretty solid business that we can, that I'm not going to worry about too much.
You think you could be anywhere close to what you were making at the Banter's height when it was in its plump Facebook years?
No, but my overhead is significantly lower. I have less, my overhead is just far less. I don't have people contributing every day, but our recurring revenue will be far more stable than it was. It might not be as much, but it will be far more stable, and the overhead will be less. So that gives us a basis by which to grow, and I would like to grow the business more and hire other writers and have potentially kind of do offshoots of the newsletter. But that's obviously in the future. But for now, that's kind of what I do see this year as being very, very, very important.
And how is the coronavirus? Let's talk about that a little bit. So obviously, we've been reading these headlines that publications that are largely based on advertising have seen a huge decrease in revenue, but for subscription-based publishers, it's been kind of a mixed bag, where some have actually seen a sharp increase, partly because they're changing their messaging and trying to convert readers by appealing to them, like, okay, this is, the media industry is cratering, like now's more important than ever if you have the means to help support it with your own money. Have you changed your messaging at all to try to, kind of adapt to the coronavirus in terms of trying to get people to subscribe?
Well, we've offered discounts. We've just basically said that, we noticed a huge uptick in subscriptions, and people want, without doing much by the way of sales or trying to get people to read us or trying to get people to subscribe due to the virus. But we did notice it, and we noticed this uptick, and sort of, to be honest, I sort of felt kind of a responsibility really to offer people a discount, because I know that the economy is in real trouble. So we were getting an uptick in subscriptions anyway. So I sort of felt like, okay, look, I think that A, we can increase the rate of subscribers, but B, I think it's like morally the right thing to do would be to lower the price during a pandemic.
And how are you doing that? I was seeing that it was like 50%. Is it 50% off for the first year, or how are you designing that discount?
Yeah, so we're offering 50% off the first year. People can sign up now during the pandemic. So while this lasts, we're going to give people 50% off.
So if you do see a sharp increase in subscribers, then that could potentially next year, once that kicks up to the full price, you could see that pay off even more, I'm guessing.
Yeah, definitely. So you're going to get some churn. The churn rate is obviously, that's anyone who runs a subscription business knows is always fearful of the churn rate. So you have to factor that in, but yeah, definitely. So next year that pays off for that pays off for next year, but I don't know. Would it have been different? I think whenever you run a sale, you tend to get more people coming in, but I don't know whether that is offset by, we were getting an uptick in subscribers anyway. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether the sales, how much benefit the sale has done us. We may have made half as many sales at full price, and got the same amount of money. So I have no idea.
What do you charge for full price?
Full price $5 a month or $49 a year.
And I've noticed you do a good job in your free newsletters of showing people what they're missing out on if they're not paying subscribers. Like you'll have your free article that's like a nice long in-depth article, and then there'll be this section of like what you missed out, and you'll have like a series of headlines and stuff that links directly to the paid content. Like, do you feel like that's a good conversion tool?
I think so, yeah. I think that's worked probably the best for us, is to show off, look, I think that people are going to subscribe to you based on what kind of content you put out. And if your free content is good, then they're going to think that they're going to assume that the paid content is good too. So, and if they can see what paid content is available, I think they're going to be more likely to subscribe. So you're just, I feel like you're demonstrating your product when you put pieces out for free, and then you're saying, look, here's what else we've got. And I think it's very, very important that you do that. Anyone running a subscription business has got to promote their paid content. And that comes in, your free content has to be great. And then you also have to show people your paid
so
content.
You can't just be like, hey, I think you should subscribe, and kind of just generally describe what they would get by just showing them. And so it's like show, don't tell. That is more enticing to them because they see stuff that they actually want to read, and then that makes them more likely to subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what kind of engagement are you getting from your subscribers? Like, do you feel kind of, now that you're working with a smaller pool of people, you're less like scale focused, that you're able to spend more time like in your comment section or replying to people who respond to the newsletter? Like, what kind of engagement are you seeing, and how much do you try to engage on a day-to-day basis?
I've actually started to try and engage a bit more recently. I took a bit of a back seat in the beginning and didn't jump in too much in the commenting section, just because I felt that wasn't the major feature of the it was the quality of the work that I wanted to kind of speak for itself, and not kind of get into these long discussions with readers. But I feel like now I've sort of reversed my position on that, and I'm jumping in a lot more in the commenting section. Specifically, when there are kind of really interesting stories that come out with, you see a lot of readers start posting their own sources, so you kind of have your own army of fact checkers and kind of amateur reporters who dig up information. That's actually been quite useful.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, well, Ben, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find your work online?
So the website is at thebanter.substack.com. You can follow us on Twitter at the Daily Banter, or on Facebook. You can just search for the Daily Banter on Facebook, and you can follow us in any one of those. I think, obviously the newsletter, you can sign up for this free newsletter as well. So you'll get a couple of our posts each week, and that's the banter.substack.com.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Thanks very much, Simon.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast. So if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.